Hello, I'm Michael Wybrow, and in this video I'm going to do a bit of live coding for a movie example. This is based on what I'd kind of planned roughly to do in the workshops, and then for a couple of reasons. One, discussion going a bit longer in the first workshop, and then some issues with one of the demos in the second workshop. I really didn't get as much time to do this, so I did a very basic version of the table view that just showed some movie data, but I didn't do anything more and didn't do anything interesting with it. So I thought I would do a quick video now just to show this. So if you're interested, I'm just going to repeat a little bit of what was in the workshop demos, but it was a bit different in each one, so you probably gain something extra from watching what I do here anyway. I have a movie array, which is an array of dictionary objects with a string and for the key and a string for a value. This is just data pulled off the movie database. So we care about title and overview and release date here. I think I've got movies from the last 4 years here. So, for a table view, the very first thing we need to do is just implement these few delegate methods, really just the top 3 that we have here, 2 that are uncommented, and the third one we have to uncomment ourselves. And we need to tell it the number of sections in the table view, the number of rows in each section. So we're going to say 1 for the first one. This is a compiler warning. Like if I try and build this code, let's actually go back here and build it and run it. This will work with an empty table view. Or at least it should. Not find movie title. This is something I was doing as part of one of the demos. So let's just run it. So it runs, but I will get some warnings for this table view controller for the place where I have these warnings. So I can just remove these, and look, I get an empty table view, so we can see this is the table view. So let's put in one section, number of rows equal to the count of my array, and I can remove these 2 warning lines, and I can specify the cells. So I need to give my reuse identifier, which was movie cell. I'm pretty sure about that. I can just go in here and do a quick check. Here's my movie cell, here's my reuse identifier, and yes, it's movie cell. So that's good. I can go back to my table view controller and I configure the cell. So we showed one version, I think in both the workshops I showed a version where you can directly refer to the properties of the cell, which are things like the labels. There's a text label, and it has a text property and it's a string and you can set it. But this is kind of older in terms of the approach that Apple recommends, and if you see this, you'll see text label will be deprecated, and further iOS use UI list content configuration instead. So the way of doing that is that we ask the cell for var content equals, we ask the cell for a default content configuration. On that default content configuration, we can set text and secondary text, and I obviously need a movie to refer to here. So the index path gives me a row and a section. We've only got one section, so we'll just use my movie equals movies index path dot row, and here we just refer to movies or movie and the title, and then for the content secondary label, which is the subtitle line, we set this to be movie release date. And then finally, we tell the cell about this content. And if I run this, the nice thing about this, which I guess I didn't show in the second workshop, is that it already understands the size of things. So then if we go in here and make an adaptation to the text size, you'll notice that as we increase our text size, even up to accessibility sizes, it relays out these cells to fit content. So let's just turn that back off to the default. Obviously things like dark mode and things work as well. And excuse me. So that's a basic list. Let's say we want to then do something with this where we wanted to have it so that when we click on a row, it transitions to another view controller and we show some information on the selected one. So how I've made this segue happen is that I literally just dragged from the particular cell, the movie cell, onto another view controller, which is an empty view controller, and I selected show. Let's give this segue an identifier. So let's call it movie detail segue. Yeah. Okay. Now let's what should we have on this view controller? I'm going to add a text view. So we've used text labels in the second workshop today. I mentioned how text views are backed by a scroll view. So even if this is a large amount of text, it's still going to be able to be displayed here. So regardless of how long the, is it called a summary? I think it was called the overview of each of these movies. As you see, some of them have longer overviews than others. So let's add a text view. I'm going to constrain this text view to just all sides of the view. I'm going to do it to the margins, and I'm going to set it equal to 0. So it'll be like right to the whatever the margin size is on all sides. So let's do that. There it is. By default, this has by default this has a system 14 text size. It's not going to adapt. This is where if we want dynamic text, we should set this to something better. So I'm going to set this to body size, which is the sort of standard text size for reading, and I can tell it, I don't know, we had a weird thing in the workshop where I had to select this once for something. I don't think I should have to, but so I'm just going to do a little test and find out if that matters or not. I guess there's some placeholder text, so let's just run this and see what happens. So here's some placeholder text. It doesn't seem to scroll here because the text isn't too long. If I adjust the size here, let's have a look what happens. No, it doesn't adjust, so yes. Okay, that answers our question. I do need to have this box checked. So let's have a quick look now and see what happens when I adjust the text size. Okay, so this looks good, and when it's large size you can see it's in a scroll view and everything works as expected. So, okay, great. Couple of things we're going to need here. We're obviously going to need to set a custom class for this, okay, which turns out I've done. So now I can use the assistant and I can create an outlet to this. So let's create an outlet here. Let's call it overview text view. So there it is. I'm going to have a property here that is the movie. So we can pass a movie to this when it gets set up. And the type of a movie was a dictionary of string keys and string values. So that's what a dictionary looks like as a literal, and this needs to be an optional because it doesn't have any initial value. And if I do that, it should be happy with it. Incidentally, like I said before, this is kind of syntactic sugar for saying a dictionary. So it's also possible to write this type definition as dictionary string, I think with a comma, string. Let's see if that's right. Yeah, so it's happy with that. So they're both equivalent. I mean, I'll write the other one here. Because I'll put this on Moodle later as well, so we can see dictionary string is just equivalent to string. Okay, so they're both the same. All right, so I've got my movie here. I want to do a couple of things if it's set. So I want to put the movie title here instead of it saying movie detail, and I want to put the overview text here instead of it saying this. So I'm just going to have a go at doing this in my view did load. That's the obvious place to change this. And I'm just going to say my navigation item, which we've referred to in the storyboard but never through code, I think. And we can set its title. So that's just the title shown on the navigation bar, is equal to my movie, and I want the title. Now, of course, this is not going to work. And why is it not going to work? Because, hurrah, this is an optional. So once again, this is a place where we use our optional binding approach. So the first thing I need to do is check there's a movie here. So let's do that. I'm going to say if let movie equals movie, right? So all I'm doing here is I'm doing optional binding where I'm creating a new variable called movie and doing it based on the optional value movie. And if this succeeds inside here, this will be unwrapped. So is it happy with that? Yes, it is. So the other thing I'm going to do in here is I'm going to set my overview text view dot text to be equal to my movie overview. Okay, so that seems fine. Now I need to do something in here to pass it the relevant movie. Now this is a segue triggering off a click, so how do I actually do that? Well, like we've seen before, the place that we respond to this is in our prepare for segue. And I haven't mentioned this before either, but these marks, this is a special kind of documentation or comment annotation, but it creates a little browser here, and it just, these are a list of all of the methods in the class. If you want to quickly jump to some of them, you can then, they have different section headings, and the section headings are based on those marks. So like you see that in here we have the table view data source delegates, and we have navigation, and you could have your own methods in a section below, and it's just easy then to do it, and these are the properties listed up the top. So anyway, let's go back to our prepare for segue, which is kind of interesting. It didn't scroll down to that. Is it because I'm zoomed in? Yes, it is. Okay, so yeah, that jumps us down to here. So what do we want to do? Firstly, just for safety, because there could be multiple segues, we should always say if our segue dot identifier is equal to, now does anyone remember what I called it? Let's find that segue, and it was called movie detail segue. So let's go back into here and say if I'm segueing to my movie detail view, then I know the type of it, so let's work out that. Let destination, which is the view controller I'm going to, is equal to my segue.destination, and I can say as because I know the type and I can cast it to it, and that's my movie detail view controller. All right, so that looks good. Yes, of course I didn't mean to assign it. I meant to do a condition to check. And yeah, haven't done anything with it yet. So then here, let's say our destination dot movie equals movies, but how do we know the index of this? So I mentioned this in the second workshop, but didn't get to it in the first one. So how do we do this? Well, we ask the table view, and from the table view, didn't want that one. From the table view, it has a property called selected index path for selected row. So this gives us the index path, right? So then when we've got the index path, we can take its row. All right, so that all looks good. What's going to happen? Of course, again, we have an optional here. So we can't just write the code in this way. And the problem is actually that index path for selected row is an optional. It is possible that this is nil. How do we deal with it? Again, our optional unwrapping. So here we can just say if let selected row is equal to our table view, our index path for selected row, and dot row. And if the index path for selected row is nil, well, this will just return nil and it will fail. Otherwise, it will get the row and that will be set. So then inside this if statement, I can assume that we have a selected row. So I can take this code, I can put it in here. I don't need any of this, and I can just say selected row. The compiler's going to complain because I don't use the destination anywhere else, so I should just put it into here. Now, this looks good. Let's run this. The commando, Ice Age Adventures of Buck Wild, the Batman, looks good, right? And presumably, all our stuff that we did before in terms of text size works okay. All right, so that looks good. What else could I show? So yeah, I did show this large text here. When I go to the second one, I'm always showing it as small. I can't remember if I showed this in the first workshop, so I can talk about that for a minute and just show when we're on the detail view, we can look at its navigation item. And in the navigation item, there's a thing here that says large title never, and we can say automatic, and it'll just choose whatever the bar is using. And then, it will show a large version. If I go to it, it'll look large like that. So this is part of the current sort of styling that Apple use for things. Okay. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to modify this a little bit to take my list here and sort it into sections. Okay, so I guess what I'm going to do now is go in here and where before these were the original movies, I guess what I'm going to do is create a new array, which I'm going to call movie years. And Whereas the type of this top one would have been an array of movies, where a movie was a dictionary. We had an array of dictionaries. Instead, I'm going to have a two-dimensional array of dictionaries. Okay, so all we're going to do is split this movie list into several sublists. So I'm just checking OBS to make sure I'm still on the screen. Yeah, I'm still on the screen. Okay, sure. So we're going to start with this as an empty array. The next thing I'm going to do is in my viewDidLoad, before I do anything, I'm going to do a little bit of a loop with my movies, and I'm going to process through them one by one. I'm going to get the date, and I'm going to pull the year out of the date because they all happen to be formatted the same. And then I'm going to split them into sublists. So how are we going to do this? I'm going to say for movie in movies. I'm going to say for this I'm going to find out the date of it, or rather the year of it. So let's do let year equals movie. Well, okay, so first of all I should check that my movie has a release date. So let's go movie let release date, because this could be an optional, equals movie release date, and we check that. Assuming that's okay, I'm going to say that my year equals my release date. Now there's a method of string called split where it returns the longest subsequence of the collection around elements equal to the given element. So if we split on a character this, then we should end up with an array of substrings, right? And we know that the way these dates look is like this. Now you could also, here's somewhere we could also use a date formatter for what it's worth, and deal with it that way. So in the same way we did in previous labs, but I'm just doing it this way. And I'm going to take the first element out of that, which would be the year. Now this will be an optional, it might not work. If it doesn't work, I'm just going to give a default value with this nil coalescing operator, and I'll just make it 2022, which is our year. So if I was to run this, I could do a quick print out and do year. I haven't changed any of my table view. I'm just doing this as a quick test to see if it works. Ooh, that's non-optional. Oh, really? Data. Oh, okay. That's fine. Okay, it wasn't optional at all. Anyway, okay, so when I run this in the console, I end up with a bunch of strings that are 2022, 2021, 2020, or 2019. So that looks pretty good. All right. What next? I want to split these into different things. I'm going to do this based on indexes that we would have for the ordering of things. So I'm going to create a kind of year int, and it's going to be equal to an int value of year, and if that's not set, I'm going to set this to 2022. So let's just have a look at my year int. looks exactly the same, so that looks good, but these are numbers I can actually use. So I'm then going to have let index, which will be the index into my first dimension of my two-dimensional array, is equal to 2022 minus the year int. So let's do a quick test here. So I'm going to have year int, and then I'm going to print a colon, and then I'm going to print the index, just so I can see what the index of each of these is going to look like. And we'll see, we should now have, yep, this looks good. So all of my 2020 movies are going to be at index 0. All of my 2021 movies are going to be at index 1. All of my 2020 movies at index 2, and all of my 2019 movies at index 3. Okay. So, next thing we're going to do, given we've got 4 years, I mean, I could write some code here that says something like, if the movie years dot count is less than the index count, so if 0 is less than my index, or if it's equal to or less than my index, then I need to add a subarray to this one, or I could just add 4 subarrays to this to begin with. But if I do the 4 subarrays for each of the 4 years, it assumes that I've only got those years. So let's do it in a little more generic form. So this is going to add empty subarray. So all I'm going to do here is I'm going to say if my current number of subarrays I've got in here is less than my index, then I'm going to add one. So I'm going to say movie years dot append. Now, because this is all strongly typed, it knows that, sorry, I want to append new element. Append new element. It knows the type of this needs to be an array of these strings, so I can just give it an empty array here, and it should be happy with that. All right, so the next thing I'm going to do is I can at this point assume that there's a subarray for each of these. So I'm just going to say movies. So we know the current movie is movie, and I'm going to say movie years dot index, which is the year. I mean, I should call this like year index or something. In fact, let's do that. Okay, so we've got our year index here, and then we just want to append the new movie into here, and I can just give it movie. Okay, hopefully, and we don't need our little print statement anymore, this should build and run, but there'll be no difference because we're not using it in the in our table view now. So let's change our table view and see if this actually worked. So the number of sections is now the number of years. So that's just movie years dot count. Then to know the count of any of the subarrays, I just say movie years, and I give it the index path. Oh no, not index path, the section. So this method gets past the section, which would be the particular year that we're talking about, and we give the count of that. Then, where I'm using a movie here, instead of it being based on movies and index path.row, it's movie years, and the first dimension is index path.section, and the second dimension is the index path.row. So that looks good. And then finally, I've got here where I do the selected row, probably what I should do instead is say selected index path, because I'm going to use both, and we'll unwrap the index path. If it exists, I now need to say here, movie years, index path dot section. Oops, not index path, I want the selected index path. Selected index path dot section, and then selected index path dot row. Now, let's have a look at this. What we would expect is now these things get split into sections. Oh man, it looked like it worked all right. So let's find one of the breaks in the years, 2022, 2021. Okay, so this is where if this was a grouped table, you would see some space between it. If this is a normal table view, you don't actually see any difference between it. So let's turn this into a grouped table view. And this is where we can try some different table view styles as well. So I'm going to select the table view in the storyboard. And then under the attributes inspector, I can change the style. We can change this to grouped. And I'm going to run it. And we see a space here for the different sections. So that looks good. And I can use, you can have headers and footers for each of the sections. So I can put one of those in and we can, so let's provide that information. It's part of the data source delegate. So we'll put it up here in that section. And if I just search for title, table view, title for header and section. So this says it asks the data source for the title of the header of the specified section of the table view. So let's just enter that. We see that it suggests some code I need to complete. And what do we get here? We get the section and we just need to return a string, or we return nil if we don't want any heading. So what's our heading going to be here? For section 0, we want it to be 2022. For section 1, we want it to be 2021. So it's kind of the opposite of my little calculation I did here for the year index is the 2022 minus the index. So instead, our title is, or our title for our section heading is going to be the year plus. So if it's 0, it's going to be, no, it's going to be the year minus that as well. So 2022 minus the index. Okay, cool. So we can do that. We can say return string for an integer calculation. It should be 2022 minus the section. Okay, I think that's right. Okay, so we see 2022 at the top, we see 2021 here, we see 2020. So let's have a look at the different styled table views. This was the grouped one. I'm going to now go back to my table view, and here I'm going to change it to inset grouped. We'll see what that looks like. So this is inset grouped, where you've got like little cells. You've seen it in the settings app maybe. And I'm going to change it to plain. And in plain, we really just have a different behavior for the section headings. So as you scroll up, you notice that the section heading here becomes part of the bar and sort of sticks to it, and then changes when you scroll up to the next one and gets that style. We better check that this works regardless of which section we're in, and it does, so that looks good. So I'll probably stop there. I guess if you wanted to, you could do something like sorting on release date or something like that, but that's kind of up to you. I'll leave that as an exercise. That's probably enough for this video. Thanks for watching and enjoy working with table views.